McGraw-Hill Ascent Audio presents Let's Talk About It, Turning Confrontation into Collaboration at Work, by Paul L. Marciano, Ph.D. Narrated by Jonathan Yen. Introduction. I hate conflict. I really do. However, I have come to realize that avoiding it does not serve me or anyone else well. When I choose to bite my tongue and stop myself from discussing an issue that concerns or upsets me, I invariably become frustrated and then resentful, not just toward the other person, but also toward myself for being too much of a wimp to initiate a conversation. Instead, I usually end up complaining to others in hopes of gaining sympathy under the guise of garnering advice. Sometimes I let my anger build to the point of losing my cool, and I speak sharply to the other person, which, frankly, is terribly unfair, as she may have had no idea that I was even upset. After losing my temper, I end up feeling worse about the situation, because I have now demonstrated to myself and others that I cannot control my emotions, let alone deal with the problem effectively. Ironically, when we have problems in our relationships, we often avoid talking about them, and in the process, make things worse. Over my 30-plus-year career, I have seen a lot of conflict in the workplace, and the damage it does to relationships, morale, and productivity when it goes unaddressed. Among the more egregious examples that still make me shake my head include the manager who refused to speak to his direct report for 2 years, an employee who was fired over text because his manager wanted to avoid conflict, and 2 colleagues who did not speak for 4 months because one failed to copy the other on an email. Obviously, most situations are more mundane and subtle. I bet that a few examples have already come to your mind. Can you imagine the total number of interpersonal conflict situations that exist in the workplace at any one time, and the adverse impact they have on individuals and organizations? Just think about how distracting these conflicts are, and how much time and energy they take to both address and avoid. I have come to believe that much conflict in the workplace, and the world, could be resolved or prevented altogether if people were skilled at straightforward conversations. Have you ever avoided having a difficult conversation, the simple thought of which caused your blood pressure to rise and heart to race? Have you ever regretted not having a critical conversation sooner because, in the end, not doing so made the situation worse? Have you gotten frustrated with yourself for not having the courage to address a person or situation head-on? Can you imagine how your life might change for the better if you could deal directly and effectively with any conflict in your life? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then you did yourself a favor by picking this book. Difficult Conversations. A difficult conversation is one we believe will evoke strong negative emotions and likely involve conflict. In our minds, the conversation may become unpredictable and unsafe as tensions rise. Or we might find the topic of the discussion embarrassing, making us vulnerable in some way. We might have to deliver bad or disappointing news, or we may simply want to ask a question to which we fear the answer will be no. In general, difficult conversations are those we anticipate will make us feel uncomfortable and may lead to a poor outcome. Examples of such situations include confronting a colleague who has taken credit for your work, discussing with a boss why you have been passed over for a promotion, furloughing or firing an employee, quitting, telling a coworker that he has bad breath or body odor, informing your supervisor about a costly mistake, notifying a customer that you cannot deliver what was promised. It is critical to realize that difficult conversations are difficult because we think they are. Conversations are not inherently good or bad, easy or difficult. They are so because we label them as such. If we say that something is hard, then it is hard. Our thoughts and words shape our reality. Moreover, we believe that we are never wrong. The assignment you were given is unfair because you say it was unfair. Your boss is a jerk because you say she is a jerk. Your colleague is conniving because you say he is conniving. How we choose to label people and situations makes them that way. The extent to which we view situations as potentially easy or difficult depends largely on how competent we feel in taking them on. For example, I will not drive in New York City because I believe it to be far too difficult and stressful. I do not feel competent in my driving skills to navigate the stop-and-go traffic. I am also embarrassed to say that I never learned to parallel park. On the other hand, I do not find public speaking hard, which some people fear more than death. In general, we experience stress whenever perceived environmental demands exceed our perceived internal resources. Thus, most people avoid engaging in what they believe would be a difficult conversation because the thought of doing so causes anxiety. But what if we changed our mindset from telling ourselves we must face a difficult conversation to believing we have the skills to engage in a healthy conversation? Healthy conversations. I find that highly successful people are very good at dealing with conflict. They address interpersonal problems quickly, in a straightforward, calm, and respectful manner. There is no finger-pointing or drama, and the goal is not to make the other person feel bad or guilt him into apologizing. A productive conversation takes place in which both people speak and listen to one another. The issue often gets resolved promptly, and, importantly, both people leave the interaction feeling complete and move on without resentment. In short, they have learned how to have healthy conversations. You will hear a whole chapter on helpful mindsets, but for now I would like you to reframe difficult conversations into healthy conversations. Just as people who are good at giving corrective feedback think in terms of constructive rather than critical, people who are good at dealing with conflict situations think of conversations in terms of healthy rather than difficult. Approaching conversations in this way can help decrease the likelihood of defensiveness on either side and emotional escalation. Such conversations are more effective and efficient, which is advantageous for the relationship and for workplace productivity. What makes for such a conversation? Healthy conversations are characterized by the following: a two-way flow of communication in which both people have the opportunity to fully express their views, opinions, concerns, and feelings in a safe environment without fear of retribution or other negative impact. Both people feel heard and understood. Communication is transparent and straightforward. There is no distortion or withholding of information. The conversation remains respectful and professional. Each person remains calm and composed. A healthy conversation does not mean that everyone gets exactly what they want. Being happy or even satisfied with the outcome is not part of the deal. For example, imagine your boss asks you to take on work unfinished by a colleague. You are not happy and ask to discuss it. The conversation might have all the elements of a healthy one, but, in the end, you still have to take on the responsibilities. It was a healthy conversation. It just did not go the way you wanted. What to expect. The goal of this book is to make you comfortable, confident, and competent in addressing and resolving conflict through healthy conversations. As with my previous title, Carrots and Sticks Don't Work, this book provides tangible and actionable strategies that will empower you to deal effectively with any workplace conflict. In this book, you will learn about the unconscious cognitive biases that lead to systematic distortions in our thinking and how to deal with different personality types. You will discover the minefields and gold mines of language and learn specific communication strategies and techniques. Perhaps most importantly, you will find many anecdotes throughout the book and an entire appendix devoted to real-world scenarios and scripts to guide you through healthy conversations on your playing field. And while I certainly hope that you find this book enjoyable and interesting, my greatest hope is that it will make a difference in your life, both professionally and personally. Up next. In order to figure out how to address potentially difficult conversations, it is helpful to understand what triggers them in the first place. Let's find out. On your playing field. 1. Whom do you consider highly skilled in holding difficult conversations and resolving conflict? What does that person say and do that makes her so effective? 2. How would you evaluate yourself in terms of your willingness and ability to address and successfully resolve contentious issues? 3. Do you believe you can learn the skills necessary to have healthy conversations? Chapter 1. Root Causes. When it comes to figuring out how best to deal with conflict, a good place to start is understanding the underlying issues and events that drive it. In fact, doing so may help us prevent problem situations from arising in the first place, rendering contentious conversations unnecessary. As you listen to the following list of common causes of conflict in the workplace, think about how these situations were handled in your own experience and how they might have been dealt with differently. Perception of inequality in workload distribution, employees not pulling their weight and having their tasks consequently pushed onto other team members. Perception of unfair or unequal pay, discord created by employees who perceive they are doing the same work as colleagues with equivalent credentials, but for less pay. Unfulfilled expectations, perceived broken promises, such as being led to expect a promotion or raise with no follow-through. Poor communication, ambiguous, inaccurate, delayed, or a total lack of communication. Ambiguous or unclear directions, instructions, or expectations. Misaligned goals. For example, when the objectives of one department run counter to those of another, or when there is competition for resources. Lack of clarity in job responsibilities. It is unclear who is responsible for what. Decisions affecting individuals' work being made without their input. When one's decisions, judgment, or character is questioned. Public criticism. Colleagues embarrassing one another. Assigning blame, finger-pointing. Constant, negative, or critical feedback. Gossip, talking behind colleagues' backs. Unfair treatment or work practices, showing favoritism, such as allowing certain employees greater flexibility in their work schedule than others. Lack of recognition, when one does not receive due credit. Poor performance, an employee being put on a performance improvement plan, formally reprimanded or terminated. Lack of accountability, an employee who has not been held accountable for poor performance. While not an exhaustive list, you can certainly see how common the causes of conflict are in the workplace. They occur every day. Just imagine how much time and energy are wasted worrying and gossiping about such issues. Imagine having the skills and confidence to address these situations and more. Summary. While the issues that elicit upset are varied, there is a common thread throughout. When people feel their survival in the workplace is threatened, they often become triggered. These root causes make people less able to do their jobs effectively, put them at a competitive disadvantage to coworkers, or in some way make them look bad. Any of these factors could limit the perceived value that employees bring to their organization, thus making them feel less relevant and expendable. They make people feel insecure. Up next. This book would not be necessary if people regularly addressed emotionally charged conversations in a straightforward manner. So why are most of us so resistant to doing so? In the next chapter, we will review the many reasons that people choose to avoid difficult conversations. On your playing field. 1. Refer to the list of root causes and identify a few that have led you to experience workplace conflict. 2. Can you think of additional reasons that cause people to become upset? 3. Which issues do you think are the most difficult to address, and why? 4. Are there any current conflicts you are refraining from addressing? Throughout the book, you will want to return to this list and apply your learnings to resolve these situations. Chapter 2. I think I'll pass. When it comes to dealing with conflict, most of us would rather take a pass. We choose to avoid conflict whenever possible because it introduces risk and potential vulnerability. When it comes to our fight or flight instinct, flight often seems like the better choice, especially when losing is the likely outcome and has severe consequences, ergo, getting fired. Thus, we often choose to keep our thoughts and concerns to ourselves, and we all probably remember times when we wish we had. We are quite good at making excuses and rationalizing why avoiding conflict is the most sensible course of action. From a psychological perspective, coming up with sensible reasons for why we should not engage in a conversation serves us well because it reduces cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is a theory proposed by Leon Festinger, in which we seek to hold our cognitions, thoughts, opinions, beliefs, and behaviors in harmony with one another. We naturally find mental discord unsettling and desire to bring our beliefs and actions into alignment. There are, of course, all kinds of problems associated with avoiding conflict. More on that in the next chapter. Right now, let's examine what we say to ourselves that allows us to take a pass on addressing situations with potential conflict. As you listen, take note of your go-to excuses and consider the impact of not having such conversations. Having the conversation won't make a difference. Have you ever felt that you have had the same conversation over and over, each instance leading to either short-lived change or no change at all? I know I have. This experience is so frustrating that at some point you simply declare to yourself, and oftentimes to others, that there is little point in revisiting the same topic yet again. And while giving up may seem the only sensible option, it leaves you feeling more frustrated and disempowered. If the same conversation has not led to the desired results, perhaps you should be having a different conversation, a healthy one. Having the conversation might make things worse. Often, our fears of addressing a conversation extend past the worry that it will make no difference. We fear that addressing the problem will lead to an even bigger one. The potential upside to having the conversation is overshadowed by the potential downside. For example, a manager might avoid addressing the behavior of an underperforming employee for fear that he may quit, which would lead to increased work and stress for others, including the manager herself. On the other hand, when a manager fails to hold an employee accountable for fulfilling his job responsibilities, she often ends up unfairly punishing her best employees with additional work, who may end up becoming resentful and losing respect for their manager. If a manager is afraid to address performance issues with a direct report, then she probably should not be a manager. Having the conversation might put me in jeopardy. Some people are vindictive, and unfortunately, retaliation may be a real concern. When people sense that they are being called out or embarrassed in front of others, they may feel attacked and respond by going on the offensive. For example, the person could start spreading rumors throughout the workplace, sabotage another team member's work, or purposely provide misleading information. Of course, the riskiest situation may be confronting your manager regarding a concern you have about her behavior, or, even riskier, taking your concerns to your manager's boss. To be clear, these may be valid concerns. At this point, however, just recognize that they are rationalizations for avoiding straight conversations. Time will make things better. No, time will not make things better. In fact, it may make them worse. Unlike acne, interpersonal problems rarely clear up on their own. For example, imagine that two team members get into an argument and stop speaking. If time truly made the issue dissipate, their relationship would improve on its own. Typically, that is not what happens. People do not forget when they have been offended or disrespected. However, sometimes one or both parties will pretend as though nothing happened, which is both aggravating and unhealthy. I bet you can remember interactions that occurred many years ago that you never addressed and cause you angst to this day. Perhaps you are even thinking of one now. The double whammy is that in such situations you may end up being angry at yourself for not having spoken up. Talking with others about your concern or upset in a timely manner is not just helpful for getting things off your chest, it also increases the likelihood that you will have a healthy, calm conversation without accumulating weeks, months, or even years of resentment. Now is not a good time. Sometimes we recognize that addressing an issue is necessary, but we justify holding off by telling ourselves that now is not a good time. By the way, we use this excuse for all kinds of decisions and behaviors that we procrastinate in our lives, like writing a book. We just have too much going on that needs our attention. This conversation can wait, especially if it means potentially upsetting the apple cart and causing us to expend time and energy that would distract us from our priorities. Sometimes we invoke empathy and tell ourselves that the timing is not good for the other person. For example, if a team member is clearly feeling overwhelmed, you might rationalize not wanting to cause him further stress. Ironically, he too may be avoiding the conversation, and your bringing it up would be a relief. Having a straightforward discussion in a timely manner helps ensure that things do not get swept under the rug and lead to ongoing animosity. The longer we wait, the less likely we are to address the situation, and the more awkward it will feel when we do. The situation isn't at a point where it really needs to be addressed. So, should one just wait until the problem gets worse? This justification is used by managers the world over seeking to avoid discussing performance problems with employees, such as a team member who has been sporadically showing up late to meetings. Employees also use this excuse to avoid addressing problems with coworkers. For example, you may have a highly extroverted and social team member who keeps stopping by your desk to chat. It is annoying, but you do not want to hurt his feelings, and so you just try to keep the conversations short. Unfortunately, he seems to be stopping by more frequently as time goes on. At what point is enough enough? It is far easier to address and extinguish problem behavior when it first arises than to let it escalate. Dealing with a small mess now is better than dealing with a big mess later. This discussion will bring up other issues that I really don't want to address. Hopefully it does. You do see the irony in this rationalization, right? Often, tense conversations do give rise to issues the other person has been refraining from discussing. Sometimes, when a conversation becomes too intense, a person will try to steer it to a less threatening topic. Should other issues surface, acknowledge and commit to addressing them, but stay focused on the reason for the current discussion. I might end up looking like the bad guy. Being liked is really important to most of us. Often we rationalize that if we draw attention to certain issues, we will be viewed in a negative light, jealous, petty, or whiny. For example, imagine working on a factory floor where assignments are supposed to be rotated among team members, but you always seem to get stuck doing the least desirable jobs. Or there are people on the team spending more time on social media than they are working. While you may have a strong desire to talk to your manager about such situations, you will likely refrain from doing so to avoid seeming like a complainer or tattletale. Instead, you end up biting your tongue and becoming resentful of your colleagues. Handling the situation using the techniques in this book will leave you looking like a responsible team member and eliminate any resentment. I don't want to get my friend in trouble. Sometimes we are put in a terrible position when a friend at work is doing something wrong or inappropriate and we know about it, especially if they ask us not to say anything. Imagine, for example, a colleague who begins to fudge her timesheet, claims to have checked over her work when you know she has not, or blames another team member when it was she who actually made the mistake. In such instances, you likely know that you should say something, but cannot bring yourself to do so. You'd better hope that your friend does not really screw up, and your manager does not find out you knew about the issue all along. As is the case in most things, honesty is the best policy. If not in the short term, then definitely in the long term. We have a good working relationship, and I don't want to risk messing it up. I have successfully argued myself out of having all kinds of direct conversations in the name of preserving a relationship. I think to myself, if I bring this up, it could really cause friction. Imagine having a colleague who does something that irritates you, and he's been doing so for quite a while. For example, he is always late to video conferences, or he speaks loudly during phone calls, most of which are of a personal nature and last for long periods of time. Or he constantly checks his social media accounts and then complains about having too much work and asks for help. If you do not address these issues, they will keep coming up. Eventually, you will start taking your frustration out on your colleague in ways that will damage the relationship, which is precisely what you tried to avoid in the first place. As my friend and client Sharon Noble puts it, if you don't talk about it, you'll act it out. I don't want to hurt the other person's feelings. Most of us have probably had the experience of working with someone who dressed unprofessionally, had bad breath or body odor, put on too much cologne or perfume, or spoke too loudly. Or maybe someone was very proud of his work, which...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?